Well, one of the big stories playing out here at Queen's Park today had to do with the so-called Freedom Convoy protests that brought downtown Ottawa and Windsor to a standstill this past winter. The Premier and Deputy Premier had their day in court today. The pair were not actually there. Instead, lawyers for them argued that Doug Ford and Sylvia Jones should not have to testify at the federal inquiry into the Federal Emergencies Act that helped bring the demonstrations to an end. Both Ford and Jones, who was Ontario's Solicitor General at the time, have been summoned to appear before the inquiry. Lawyers are trying to squash that summons, citing parliamentary privilege, which essentially provides immunity to sitting politicians. They're arguing that not respecting parliamentary privilege would leave all politicians open to possible fines, contempt of court, or imprisonment in the future. In court today, lawyers representing Ford and Jones claimed, quote, "It's our view that irreparable harm will occur if stay is not granted." Judge Simon Fothergill didn't seem fully convinced, saying, quote, "The practical harm is simply the two people come to testify, and it's difficult to see how that would be irreparable harm in the law." The reply, quote, "The irreparable harm in our position is the harm to the rule of law and an important constitutional principle that underlines the separation of powers."
Great to see everyone.
Ford and Jones have been summoned to appear on November 10th, a day that the Ontario legislature isn't sitting. They're basically asking for a stay that would buy the court more time to consider how parliamentary privilege applies in this particular case. But lawyers representing the inquiry argued that could take too long, since the testimony stage of the hearing is expected to wrap up later this month.
Ottawans deserve answers, and quite frankly, they deserve an apology.
Interim Liberal leader John Fraser represents the riding of Ottawa South. He's among those calling on the Premier to drop the legal challenge.
I don't understand why the Premier is afraid of testifying, or why his staff are afraid of him testifying. All he has to say is, here's why I made this decision.
The Premier said back in June that he would testify. Why has he changed his mind now?
After hearing from both sides today, the judge reserved his judgment. He says he's hoping to make a final ruling on Tuesday or by November 10th at the latest. At Queen's Park, Richard Southern, City News.
This is City News Everywhere.